What if the most powerful fat-burning tool is already sitting on your dinner plate right now? Most people waste money chasing fat loss with expensive supplements that barely move the needle at all. Science, however, keeps pointing back to something remarkably simple, affordable, and available to absolutely everyone without exception. Protein, caffeine, and resistance training form a powerful triad that researchers are only beginning to fully understand. Shocking published studies show people eating more calories from protein actually lost body fat, not gained it. This single finding challenges everything we were taught about calories in versus calories out and weight management. Welcome to Real Health Logic, your source for evidence-based health insights that actually make a real difference. Today, we are diving deep into what science genuinely says about fat loss, protein, and caffeine together. Let us start with something that surprises almost every person who first hears it from a researcher. Dr. Bill Campbell is a scientist who studies fat loss professionally and has dedicated his career to it. When asked what he considers the most profound stimulator of fat loss, his answer was very clear. He listed three things without hesitation: protein, caffeine, and exercise, in that exact order of his priority. Most people hear protein and immediately think muscle building, hypertrophy, and gym gains, nothing more than that. But Dr. Campbell refers to protein as something entirely different and far more exciting for everyday people. He calls it a lipolytic nutrient, meaning it actively participates in the process of releasing stored body fat. That single reframing changes everything about how we should approach our daily eating habits and food choices. Now here is where the research gets genuinely shocking and hard for even scientists to initially believe. Studies were conducted where subjects increased their daily calorie intake by 500 to 700 extra calories. These extra calories came exclusively from protein, and the subjects were also engaged in resistance training regularly. The outcome was not what traditional nutrition science would have predicted based on the simple calorie equation. Not a single subject in these studies gained any measurable body fat during the entire study period. Let that sink in for a moment, because it truly goes against decades of mainstream nutritional thinking completely. You increase calories, you gain fat. That is what we were all taught, but the data disagrees. Dr. Campbell admitted he struggled to believe these findings when he first read them from another research lab. So, he decided to run his own carefully controlled study inside his own laboratory to test this properly. His study used resistance-trained females and divided them into two distinct groups with very different protein targets. One group was told to eat no more than 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight daily. The other group was required to eat at least 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram every single day. Every workout in the study was fully supervised inside the laboratory to ensure complete consistency and accuracy throughout. Subjects also had to meet a strength requirement just to enter, proving they were genuinely resistance trained already. Each participant also had access to a personal coach to answer questions about hitting their protein targets daily. After the study concluded, the high-protein group had gained more lean muscle mass, which was expected naturally. But the result that stood out was the significant amount of body fat they lost relative to baseline. This was Dr. Campbell's own data from his own lab, and he trusted those numbers completely without doubt. He then went back through the published literature, looking for more studies showing this same pattern consistently. He found not just one or two more studies, but approximately 6 studies showing the same repeating outcome. Across all of them, subjects increasing calories only from protein either maintained body fat or actually lost it. There was never a single study where subjects eating extra protein gained measurable body fat in the end. 2 outcomes and only 2 outcomes kept appearing: no fat gain, or actual measurable fat loss instead. One of the most striking studies he found involved women between the ages of roughly 50 and 80 years. These women had what researchers call normal weight obesity, meaning average weight but very low lean muscle mass. The only intervention researchers made was telling one group to increase their daily protein intake modestly upward. Protein went from around 0.9 grams per kilogram up to approximately 1.3 grams per kilogram per day. The other group was told to change absolutely nothing about their diet or lifestyle during the study period. There was no exercise added, no calorie counting required, and no other dietary changes made whatsoever during it. The group that only increased their protein gained significant lean mass and lost significant body fat comparatively. No gym, no cardio, no calorie deficit, just more protein producing a real measurable body composition shift. This suggests that protein itself, independent of exercise, can actively drive favorable changes in body composition over time. Now, a common question arises here, especially among people who come from a low-carb health background online. If protein spikes insulin, and insulin inhibits fat burning, how can protein possibly be a fat loss tool? This is a genuinely important question, and it deserves a clear, science-based answer that removes all confusion. Yes, whey protein is insulinogenic, meaning it does cause a measurable rise in insulin after you consume it. However, whey protein also simultaneously triggers a rise in glucagon, a hormone that carbohydrates do not produce alone. With carbohydrates, you get an insulin spike, but glucagon remains relatively unchanged and does not rise alongside it. With whey protein, both insulin and glucagon rise together, and that distinction changes the entire physiological outcome completely. Here is why that matters so much. Insulin without sufficient glucagon would cause your blood sugar to drop dangerously. Since whey protein contains no carbohydrates, your blood sugar could fall too low if glucagon did not respond. Glucagon rises to protect blood sugar stability, ensuring your body stays balanced and does not experience a crash. So the net effect of consuming whey protein on blood sugar is essentially neutral and metabolically very safe. The insulin rise from protein is also beneficial for muscle because insulin is powerfully anti-catabolic in nature. It lowers muscle protein breakdown, which means whey protein builds muscle through two separate and powerful mechanisms simultaneously. It increases muscle protein synthesis while also reducing the rate at which your existing muscle breaks down daily. This is why whey protein is considered one of the most complete and effective muscle nutrients available today. But going back to the fat loss question, the outcome studies tell us the most important truth here. Mechanisms are interesting, but they exist to explain outcomes, and the outcomes repeatedly point toward protein-aiding fat loss. When protein intake is increased from suboptimal levels to adequate levels, measurable fat loss consistently follows in research. The key phrase there is from suboptimal to adequate, which matters a great deal for interpreting these results properly. If someone is already eating 2 grams of protein per kilogram daily, and they double it, results may differ. Most of the sedentary population studies showed subjects starting at around 0.8 to 0.9 grams per kilogram daily. Bringing that up to 1.3 or 1.6 grams per kilogram was where the fat loss benefit clearly appeared. So the practical takeaway is that optimizing a low protein intake is where the most dramatic changes happen reliably. Now let us talk about why protein may behave this way from a deeper nutritional science perspective entirely. First, protein has the highest thermic effect of any macronutrient, meaning your body burns more calories digesting it. Roughly 20 to 30% of the calories in protein are burned off during the digestion process itself. Compare that to roughly 5 to 10% for carbohydrates and just 0 to 3% for dietary fat. This means a 200-calorie serving of protein effectively delivers far fewer net calories than carbohydrates or fat would. Second, protein is highly satiating, keeping you fuller for longer and reducing the urge to snack unnecessarily throughout the day. Third, excess protein is very difficult to convert into stored body fat compared to excess carbohydrates or dietary fat. While isotope studies show it can technically happen, Applied human research has not demonstrated this occurring in practice consistently. The body appears to preferentially shuttle extra protein calories toward lean tissue rather than toward your fat stores. This nutrient partitioning effect is one of the most fascinating and still not fully understood aspects of protein metabolism. Now let us shift to the topic of protein timing and how much you can absorb in one sitting. For a long time, the fitness world operated on a firm belief that 30 grams per meal was the limit. The idea was that anything beyond 30 grams per sitting was simply wasted and provided no additional benefit. A landmark study published recently challenged this belief directly and produced results that shocked even experienced nutrition researchers. Subjects were given either 25 grams or 100 grams of protein immediately following a resistance training workout session. Researchers used isotopically labeled protein to trace exactly where every amino acid traveled throughout the entire body afterward. They measured how much was absorbed in the digestive tract, how much entered the bloodstream, and how much reached muscle. Of the 25-gram dose, roughly 18% of the amino acids successfully made it to skeletal muscle tissue. Of the 100-gram dose, approximately 13% reached skeletal muscle, showing a slightly lower efficiency at higher amounts. There is indeed a diminishing return at higher doses, but the absolute amount reaching muscle was still far greater. More importantly, muscle protein synthesis was measurably higher with 100 grams compared to just 25 grams of protein. The 25-gram dose raised muscle protein synthesis about 20 to 30% above the zero protein control group baseline. The 100-gram dose raised muscle protein synthesis an additional 20% above what the 25-gram dose already achieved. This study demonstrated clearly that our bodies can utilize far more protein in one sitting than previously believed. The protein from the larger dose was absorbed and utilized over a full 12-hour window after consumption. This is enormously liberating news for people who practice intermittent fasting or eat within a time-restricted eating window. You no longer need to worry that consolidating your protein intake into fewer larger meals will waste it entirely. While evenly distributing protein across 3 to 5 meals remains the gold standard for maximizing muscle protein synthesis daily, larger single servings are still highly productive and not wasteful at all for most practical purposes. This also has direct implications for fat loss, because a large protein bolus after training is powerfully satiating naturally. If protein is lipolytic, then a concentrated post-workout protein dose may extend fat-burning effects for hours afterward, too. Now let us turn to the second major fat loss tool that Dr. Campbell highlighted: caffeine and its mechanisms. Caffeine is a beta-adrenergic agonist, meaning it binds to receptors that signal the body to release stored fatty acids. This liberation of fatty acids from fat cells is called lipolysis, and caffeine triggers it through a direct pathway. Beyond lipolysis, caffeine also increases beta oxidation, meaning your body actually burns a greater proportion of fat for fuel. It mildly suppresses appetite in some studies, with no published research showing it ever increases appetite in subjects. When caffeine is consumed alongside food, it measurably increases the thermic effect of that meal you are eating. It also increases the number of calories burned during exercise, turning a 100-calorie workout into a 120-calorie one. Caffeine appears to support fat loss through nearly every pathway in the energy balance equation simultaneously and consistently. To test whether caffeine actually causes real-world fat loss over time, Dr. Campbell ran an 8-week controlled study. Resistance-trained males were given a caffeine-containing thermogenic supplement, providing 200 milligrams of caffeine once daily for 4 weeks. The dose was then increased to 2 servings daily for the remaining 4 weeks of the study period. Every workout was supervised inside the lab, ensuring training was consistent between the caffeine and placebo groups throughout. At the end of 8 weeks, the caffeine group lost significantly more body fat than the placebo group did. The caffeine group lost approximately 1.1% of body fat, while the placebo group lost essentially nothing at all. This confirmed that caffeine, taken consistently over time, does produce measurable real-world fat loss in resistance-trained individuals reliably. The effect was modest, but real, and statistically significant, making caffeine a legitimate though not dramatic fat loss aid. For context, a 25% caloric deficit combined with resistance training typically produces about 1% fat loss monthly. Caffeine achieved about half that rate without any dietary restriction, which is meaningful depending on your personal goals entirely. The fat loss effects of caffeine are also likely amplified when combined with consistent exercise over extended time periods. Caffeine taken before training means more fat burned during the session itself, compounding the overall weekly fat loss effect. Here is an additional scientific insight not always discussed when people talk about protein and fat loss together publicly. Research shows that high-protein diets significantly increase circulating levels of peptide whey and GLP-1 in the body. These are powerful gut hormones that send satiety signals to the brain and reduce hunger between your meals. This hormonal hunger suppression is likely one of the key reasons protein-rich diets reduce overall calorie intake naturally. People eating more protein tend to eat less overall without consciously restricting or tracking their calorie intake daily. This automatic appetite regulation is a major practical advantage that makes high-protein diets easier to sustain long-term. Additionally, leucine, the amino acid most abundant in whey protein, directly activates the mTOR signaling pathway in muscle. mTOR is often described as the master switch for muscle protein synthesis and muscle growth in the human body. Activating it through leucine-rich whey protein triggers muscle building while simultaneously supporting the metabolic improvements we have discussed here. This dual action makes whey protein uniquely powerful among all protein sources for improving body composition over time. Putting it all together, the most practical fat loss strategy science supports is surprisingly straightforward for most everyday people. Optimize your protein intake first, especially if you are currently eating below 1 gram per kilogram of body weight daily. Add resistance training consistently, as it amplifies the lean mass benefits and fat loss effects of adequate protein intake. Use caffeine strategically before workouts or with meals to boost thermogenesis, lipolysis, and exercise energy expenditure simultaneously each day. These three tools, protein, resistance training, and caffeine, work synergistically and are accessible to virtually everyone regardless of budget. No exotic supplement stack, no extreme restriction, and no complicated protocol are required to see meaningful and lasting results. The science is clearer than ever, and it keeps pointing back to the same foundational principles again and again. Eat enough protein, lift weights regularly, and use caffeine wisely. That is the evidence-based fat loss formula today. If this breakdown helped you see fat loss through a clearer and more science-grounded lens than before today, please hit the like button so this information reaches more people who genuinely need it out there. Subscribe to Real Health Logic so you never miss an episode built entirely on peer-reviewed research and clear logic. Every week, we break down complex science into simple, actionable insights you can apply to your real daily life. Your health decisions deserve to be driven by evidence, not trends, and that is exactly what we deliver here, always.